What differences did you feel or observe when you were working on, say, the Guardians or the Captain America Brave New World, these sort of big blockbuster, big screen projects versus, the Miss Marvel, Loki, like some of the ones that were going to Disney Plus? Could you actually feel a difference? Or could you feel even the pull of Marvel having so many different things they were trying to bring to the audience in a relatively short span of time?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode, a special episode, I'd say, of the Nerd Gen Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me as always is Mr. Brian Schultz. Today we got a very special guest. Is our new attempt at expanding the channel to give you more information. Right? We just two dudes talking about the superhero genre and all this stuff, but we wanted to also talk about people who have participated in these projects in some degree and wanted to know about their experience. Because Brian and I speculate a lot. We started to sort of reach out and talk to people, and discuss this genre. So today we have a special guest on the show today. He is a props artist and a specialty 3D modeler. He has spent, I think, probably the last 5 years helping build some of the biggest franchises in entertainment. He broke into the film industry in 2020 with Marvel, starting, I believe, with Miss Marvel. Since then, he's contributed to over a dozen major productions, including Spider-Man No Way Home, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Thor: Love and Thunder, Loki, and Agatha All Along. Most recently, he has crossed over to the DC side, so that's going to be interesting to see what the experience is working with either organization. With over a decade of experience in 3D modeling and 8 years in fabrication and 3D printing, Daryl brings a unique blend of digital and hands-on craftsmanship to every project. And I've seen it. If you've ever checked out his Broken Nerd channel on YouTube, you're glued to the process of how he creates and thinks about creating these things. I'd like to welcome Mr. Darrell Maloney to the channel.
Thank you for
having
having
me
me on, guys. Morning.
So I was introduced to you by Freddie Maloney. Shout out to Freddie Maloney. I don't think he probably sleep. Or he probably wants me to send him the link, and I'm like, come on, man.
Him, he's probably
But he introduced us. He came on our show that we had a long time ago with Freddie Maloney and Tracy Spivey. Shout outs to him on the Eggheads Entertainment Show. Egghead News is what we called it.
Yeah.
And he was on the show, and I was introduced to the work that he was doing, and I went to his channel, and I was just a fan of what he was creating and how he was creating and the thought process that he had behind creating such things. So I guess my first question is, what was it that first piqued your interest in wanting to not necessarily pursue 3D modeling and being a prop artist, but was it a thing that you just wanted to try out because it seemed kind of dope and it was something new? Well, how did that all come about?
It was really an evolution process. I had started, I used to draw when I was younger, and I kind of left the artistry field when I was young. I was supposed to go to school for it, actually.
Okay.
And then I started watching like a lot of VFX breakdowns, especially by
On YouTube?
ILM. On YouTube.
Okay.
And the one in particular that piqued my interest in getting in 3D modeling was Prometheus. I always say this, Prometheus, that VFX breakdown really piqued my interest in wanting to 3D model. So from that point forward, I started 3D modeling, just watching a bunch of YouTube videos, kind of getting the gist of the program. And then a couple years later, I was on YouTube and I saw this guy, his name is Uncle Jesse, and he was 3D printing a Black Panther helmet. And at that time, I didn't know anything about 3D printers, and it really piqued my interest in terms of what this technology was. And then from there, I bought my first printer. And then what was
the first printer that you bought?
I literally was showing my kids the other day. I don't remember the brand name of it, but it was this small printer that I had because I was telling my kids how far the technology has come since I had bought my first printer. And then immediately after that, I think maybe a month or two after that, I bought a second printer, and that kind of just started building. And then I decided to just make a YouTube video. It wasn't nothing that I didn't think was gonna take off, or I mean, not that it went crazy or anything, I just decided I was, and I think I even said in the first YouTube video that I wasn't planning on making this video. I was missing footage because I was just shooting here and there. And I put that video out, and kind of from there, it just kept evolving.
So it's funny, you get into the business when that technology has already become sort of, I guess, a mainstay of productions. I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, what has that sort of effectively displaced, or how has that maybe changed or evolved what used to be the process of developing the things that now come out of the printer and come out of sort of the programs that you're using?
So from my understanding, and then especially working with individuals that tend to do things, we would say by hand, there's kind of collaboration process. Did it eliminate jobs? I don't know. I came in on the back end of that, but there's a collaboration process. So and we might get into this a little further into the conversation, but my end of it is digital fabrication. It still requires somebody to go in and have the knowledge to make a mold out of that prop. I know houses like um, some of the other houses that make props, they still have hand sculptors. They still sculpt things by hand. So it's not that the digital fabrication totally replaces those individuals. It's still a art
It
that's
made them
there.
more efficient in terms of creating it, right?
Right. There's been projects where they've asked for a prop and they wanted it to be handmade, and the person's like, hey, it'd just be faster to do it digitally, especially when there's a fast turnaround time. So there's instances where it really comes in handy in terms of time. And then if you have the time and you can do it by hand, um, I see where both mediums are in need.
Would you say that it eliminates the guesswork in terms of size and stuff like that? Because if you have the 3D model, you have sort of the dimensions that you already want to create instead of creating from scratch. Does that help in that the transition from 3D model to actual creation?
Sometimes.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm just speaking from my own experience. Sometimes it helps because, especially if you have 3D scan of the individual that you're modeling around, that helps a lot.
Got it. Got it.
Um, but there's still inconsistencies even with printing. There's been many times where we had to reprint parts so that they fit properly or fit to the liking of the costume designer. So it's
Gotcha.
not always 100%. Hey, it just came off the printer, it's ready to go.
Got
There's
it.
still that
Do you
back and forth collaboration.
do you recall the first thing that you made
Yeah, the very first project I got. Wait, are we talking about for the industry or just for myself?
for yourself? For
For
yourself
myself.
before you
So,
were off into that world.
so actually, there's a process called Pepicura. And basically, what they do is they take a digital file and they break it down to a paper template. And then you could take that paper template, put it together, and then have a 3D piece. And then you go through the process of putting Bondo and making it a solid piece. It goes from paper to an actual solid piece. And my first project that I did was a Magneto helmet. And I recently
Oh,
got
I
rid of
remember that joint.
Yeah, I recently got rid of it.
I've been trying to get Freddie to tell you to, yo, let me get that.
I
I'll
got rid
give
of
you
it.
something. Somebody pay for it?
No, I just let it go. And to be honest with you, I was gonna do some content around it, from the Pepicura to like me 3D modeling and printing it and just showing the differences in. But when I was moving, I didn't have a lot of room. So I
Oh,
got rid of a lot of
wow.
stuff. But yeah, that was kind of like
Damn.
my first like project. And then in terms of like 3D printing, I think my very first project was like I printed the Star-Lord's mask, and I didn't even model it at that time. I had downloaded from one of the
Got it.
websites,
Got it.
and I think I put that together. But yeah, and then after that, I started like, because there's a different process for 3D modeling for printing, and then a 3D modeling for like VFX. So I had to learn how to change my workflow for 3D modeling for printing versus when I was just modeling just to like do like 3D renders, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Yeah, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but Daryl hit on something that actually was on my extended list, was this idea of, in a world where visual effects have become increasingly digital and computer generated, and you see, especially in some of the large IP projects that you've worked on, where the line of one ends and the other begins, because like, how much of a premium is on practical versus how much is sort of, hey, you're deferring to something that's just going to be visually conceived of later and added to the character you see on screen. Like, I'm kind of curious now how much of, let's call it for you specifically, how much time you're spending kind of servicing the one side versus the other in something like a Marvel project.
So I will tell you from my experience, like your previous question, the two sides, there's a collaboration process. And sometimes unbeknownst to me, they'll come to me and say, hey, we need this prop, we'll make this prop. And then when I see it on the back end, like when the movie comes out or the show comes out, VFX has added certain functionalities to that part that I wasn't even thinking of.
Okay.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay.
And so that's kind of how the collaboration, and then so they will take it, and then so if it's like a digital character that's like, let's say Groot, that has that piece, will they still need a physical piece that maybe Star-Lord needs to handle? So they do take what we design and then add it to their VFX pipeline, if that makes sense. So like for Guardians of the Galaxy, like all the guns that we produce, I had to package up and send over. They had to send over to VFX.
Interesting. Okay, so I was actually going to go to that because like I noticed you designed a lot of the weapons and handhelds and stuff, but you don't totally know at the time you're creating the physical version, all the bells and whistles, the lights, like all the beams, like all the things that is going to be used for in the final product. That comes at a separate point.
Yeah, and that those discussions I had in the process, like, hey, we need this to be functional. We need space to add like actual lights, practical lights.
Okay.
So there's like a couple rifles that we did that actually needed space within the rifle itself for electronics to go inside of it. So those things are discussed up front before we start fabricating the piece.
So now that we're talking about working relationships, Marvel, how did that relationship begin? Did you reach out to them? Did they find you? Was it through a connection? Walk me through how that started and what was the first project that they asked you to work on?
So this was during COVID. I was putting out quite a bit of content, not really on YouTube, but just on Instagram. And I had a friend now. She's a pretty well-known cosplayer. And she was following me. And one day out of the blue, she sent me a message saying like, hey, my husband wants to talk to you. And me thinking that it was like, oh, well, maybe he just wants a commission done. I was literally getting ready to be like, so I asked my wife, she's like, no. She's like, just see what he wants. So I messaged her back and I said, sure. So maybe about 10 minutes later, he called me and he's like, hey, I've been following your work for a while. He's like, I do work for Marvel. And he was like, there's a project that's coming up and I think you would be great for it. He's like, I think you're ready. So I was like, okay, like, I'm not going to say no. And so
I think he's ready.
Like,
this sounds like Nick Fury in the shadows for RDJ. I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative.
So I hang up the phone and I'm looking at my wife and she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, you're never going to believe. And then so he's like, hey, I'm going to have the costume designer call you. At the time, it was for Miss Marvel. And then maybe about 10 minutes later after that, the costume designer called me and she was like, we're looking for A, B, and C. Would you be willing to sign on to the project? And I'm like, absolutely. And then from there, I think it was either the next day, it may have been the same day, he introduced me, the same individual, his name is Chris, introduced me to Russell Bobbitt, who's the prop master for Marvel. And Russell saw some of the work and he's like, listen, man, he's like, I got a project I can put you on right now. And I think I was working that project within like days of with him, talking with him, and produced that piece. And it was in production a couple days later. And then from there, Russell and I developed a really good relationship. And from that point forward, I kind of like was under his wing for every project that he had. He kind of just took me along.
Dope. So what was the actual, like, when you first started, what was the actual ask as far as we need you to build this? And what sort of instructions did they give you for you to start creating, I would say? How did it feel? Like when you got did it feel different from when you want to create something? Oh, I want to create the Magneto hat, for example. You did that on your own. This one, you were going to hand this over to something big. How did it feel in terms of the difference in terms of starting to create something like that?
The pressure was on, because not only because I wanted to make a good impression, but I had the added pressure of not letting the individual that recommended me down as well, because I wanted to make his recommendation look good as well. So that was really on the forefront of my mind, per se, the back end of it, of like what I do. I just wanted to make his recommendation count. So in terms of like the process, because I like graphic design, that back and forth collaboration process of approvals and wasn't anything particularly new. It was just dealing with on the 3D side, where I was used to dealing with that kind of process on the graphic design side. And then just going about my natural process in terms of 3D modeling, they just gave me instructions, say, hey, this is what this part needs to look like. He actually sent me a sketch at first, like he just hand drew it.
Okay.
And he said, hey, can you make this like something like this, but kind of just your interpretation of it. So I went from there. There was a couple notes back and forth, and then the director got a hold of it and they made their notes. And then this part needed to actually be not necessarily like a functional piece, that they needed it to do something after the VFX took place. So I needed to make it be able to do that certain thing that they needed it to do. And that required some fabrication in the 3D model to do that part. And that one I actually 3D printed and sent down for them. And yeah, that was kind of like the first kickoff. And then I added some like little details that he really liked, that I remember him distinctly telling me, he's like, hey, this is the kind of stuff that I like to see people think about. And then kind of just went from there, and next project. And
that freedom to think outside the box and not just do stuff, because you know what I'm saying? I like that approach. That's how I do my stuff when I edit. We talk about what we want, and then I add my sort of seasoning to it. You know what I'm saying? Brian, you had something?
Yeah, so this was actually one of the most things I was most interested to ask you about, which is, in the case of something like Marvel, where you have in many cases, a long history of comics illustration that presumably is going to show you like some sort of roadmap for what a character should look like, how they're supposed to dress costume-wise, what props or weapons or tools they've used. But at the same time, these are adaptations, right? You're not regurgitating exactly what's on the page. I was really curious as to how folks sort of in your department figure out that balance of comics accuracy or honoring a certain look that the character is expected to have and that the fan base is going to want to see, versus finding your own flavor and your own take and your own practicality, honestly, that like actually makes it work on screen in a way that it probably might not work if it's just two-dimensional on a page.
Right. And that really came down to like, especially things that I've worked on, that came down to, it really was notes from either the costume designer or the director on how accurate they wanted it. A lot of the things that I worked on per se weren't directly pulled from the comics. We were literally coming up with a lot of new things that the script called for.
Interesting.
But there was certain instances where we did pull inspiration from the comic books, and we try to get it as accurate as possible. But in terms of how that occurred, that really came down from always for me in my case, always came down from the either director or costume designer, and then down the pipeline through Russell to me. And then we were kind of like, either depending on the time period that it's set in, we will try and make it fit within that time period. So like for Guardians of the Galaxy, one note that was like, hey, when we were doing like the guns and everything, like they wanted, especially Russell was always adamant about making sure that the guns had this kind of like rusted, dirty feel. So he kind of wanted to keep that aesthetic going. So that was one thing that he always hammered home. Like, hey, it's not like, if this is too clean, like we need to make sure it's a little needs some grime or dirt. And so those were like kind of notes that
Like
we
it's
like,
used.
yeah, like those are things that I made sure like, okay, I know he's gonna notate this, so let me, and then again, like when we were working in the planet, I think it's called Orgo, that had to match the aesthetic of that planet. And it was really organic, bone. So we had to keep within that aesthetic of that. Like, what would this thing look like if it was produced in this planet or in this environment?
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool though, right? Because you're getting that. That sort of implies to me, like, yeah. So, for example, if we take the Guardians franchise, we know that James Gunn sits atop sort of the kind of the visualization of what we're
Right.
seeing. But that actually sounds to me like you actually do retain a fair amount of autonomy to kind of flex your imagination, right? If the parameters are kind of like, well, here's the world,
Right.
you're the one imagining what
Right.
fits that world. That's
Right.
actually, honestly, that's actually maybe even a little more autonomy than I might have expected. For the outside perception is there's this Marvel machine, especially at that time, that
Yeah.
kind of everything is being kind of channeled into. But you're sort of implying that like there is a fair bit of creative freedom, sort of at the micro level, which is pretty
Right.
cool.
Right. And then at the end of the day, the decision falls back on the director, or what
The yay or nay.
looking at the right. Right.
So for Miss Marvel, I don't know if you already said what they asked you to make. It was the mask.
Right.
Were there a bunch of things? And while you were talking, I was thinking about, because they say, "Oh, we're in this world." Do you get to see before, obviously, the fans see what this movie looks like?
No. Oftentimes, I did not even get to see what the final prop looked like until I saw it on screen. Because I worked, I was remote. So a lot of the work that I did, I sent the digital files to the production, and then they would produce it. And then sometimes, they would come back and show me pictures of the final part before it's actually on screen. But so it's two different wheelhouses, especially like with Miss Marvel. Like I worked on the costume side and the prop side. So I was able to see, that was my real introduction into both sides of how the two different departments do things. And then Russell had a particular way of working as well. But for Miss Marvel, I was able to work costume and props. So I was doing them simultaneously at the same time. And a lot of that work was concept art that was already established. And then I came in with the digital part to make it a physical piece.
So, for example, like the bangles, you worked on the bangles.
Correct.
And
those
was
were
it someone?
That was somebody that they had already established. That was a collaborative process between, I believe, visual development and the costume designer assistant. And I worked very closely with them for that one, because that was, they considered that a prop. That one that fell on the prop side. And you'd be amazed, like a lot of the jewelry falls on the prop side. Things of that nature. So that one was a collaboration between Russell and I. And then like the mask for Thunderbolt, that was a collaboration.
Because you worked on a lot, on this project.
Yeah. And so, it was a fun experience. I got to know some amazing people, relationships that carried over as well. And that was kind of like my kickoff.
You've been referencing for Marvel both projects in film and television.
Right.
And, you started working with them at a time where they were certainly expanding the content they were trying to offer at a pretty incredible rate. And I'm curious, even from your seat, what differences did you feel or observe when you were working on, say, the Guardians or the Captain America Brave New World, these sort of big blockbuster, big screen projects versus, the Miss Marvel, Loki, like some of the ones that were going to Disney Plus? Could you actually feel a difference? Or could you feel even the pull of Marvel having so many different things they were trying to bring to the audience in a relatively short span of time?
In terms of the workflow, there was not much that was different. Again, because I was closely working with Russell. So like that process that he had kind of expanded all throughout this project. So that, now I will say the consistency of work was there. So there was one point where I was working on 4 different projects,
Mhm.
or 4 different titles at the same time because of and then it kind of, when things kind of slowed down, it was like, okay, we're done with this project. Now we're moving on to this one. Whereas when they were really pumping out the content, it was, I think I was working like 3 projects at one time.
Do you recall the 3 projects?
I believe it was Spider-Man No Way Home, Miss Marvel, and then Hawkeye at the same time. And then like
Oh,
right
okay.
after that, She-Hulk came. And then I think right after that, I spent the whole summer on Guardians of the Galaxy. Like that was literally a whole summer
Mm.
of work.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Well, because you
but
see it in and you see it in Russell's bio too, where like up to a certain point, there's like a Marvel project interspersed with several non-Marvel projects, and then it just becomes Marvel projects,
yeah,
like like nonstop for about close to a decade now.
yeah.
So
It was fun though. I'm the type of person that I love staying busy. So I was just relishing in it. Like I just loved it being busy like that.
Brian and Daryl, have you seen Bowfinger? Eddie
No.
Murphy, Steve Martin?
not in a long time. Yeah, I've seen it, but it came
Okay.
out like 20 years ago, right? So
Yeah. There's this scene at the end when they're watching their movie, and there's this experience that they're having while they watch their movie that they're in or they directed. Did you have that same feeling when you saw your prop in the theaters, sitting in the theaters?
No.
What?
Let me tell you. So the first prop that I saw on screen, and this is like no lie, I was literally talking to my wife about this last week, and so it was Captain America, Winter Soldier. I had did my first prop for, and that was the first thing that was going to air. So
Mm.
this was still during COVID. Everybody was home. It was airing on Disney Plus, and
I'm sorry, what year did you get the call from Ms. Marvel?
I think it was 2021, if I'm not mistaken. Like all those dates kind of like run.
yeah, it's
So
fair. For all
everything
of
was
us.
happening so fast, and then it just kind of just took off from there. And I was still working a full-time job at that, so I was doing the
Oh,
Marvel
wow.
part-time in the evening. Because when they had called, I was working from home at the time, and then my full-time job, had actually called us back in. So when I would get off, and I worked a early enough shift, I worked from 5 to 1. So when I get off at 1 o'clock, I would come home, and then for the rest of the day, I was doing Marvel stuff. So
Wow.
that's how kind of like my schedule was for a while, up until I decided to leave that job and then take Marvel on full time.
Oh, okay.
But getting back to the question that you asked me before, um, it had aired on Disney Plus, and I'm sitting there and I'm excited. I'm like, and then my wife and my kids are just like, at the time my wife she was actually working, and then the kids were, I think they were like inundated with schoolwork, and I was sitting there, I'm like, nobody's
Nobody cares.
nobody cares. And to be honest with you, from that point forward, I'm like, I'm not even making if I see it, cool,
Wonderful.
yep, and then I'm moving on.
I would have been like, hey, guys, come check this out. Don't worry, flush later. Come here. We'll check this out.
Hey, because my wife asks me all the time. She's like, you're not proud of yourself. You don't. I said, I am proud of the work I accomplished. I said, but my whole thing
I
is
don't want to
like,
be more excited than you.
I always wanted to keep that consistency. My whole thing was building the resume, and keeping the jobs coming in and being able to build that resume. So I love doing the work, and it's fun.
Mhm.
So that was my whole thing. It was never about like getting the recognition or thing. It was a point where I'm like, because again, I get asked that question all the time. How do you feel about it? Then it's just a weird kind of. I don't think to this day it really set in the work that I done, and the work that I was able to do, that I was blessed enough to be able to do. Um, and so I kind of just, and maybe it's just the humbleness in me. I'm just like, hey, like it's work.
I asked from the perspective of seeing it for the first time, seeing a piece of work on the big screen, on the little screen. But that first time, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it
When
was
you like,
exciting, and taken away from what happened that day. It was exciting to see. I'm like, that's cool. Like, and especially what they did with it, that I wasn't thinking about. Like I told you with the VFX, I'm like, oh, that added like a whole nother element to the part. So it was cool seeing, and it's always cool seeing how it's like when it like how it turns out once it's done, and then seeing the actors and everything interact with it and things of that nature. So it's always exciting to see that part. Um, and how and like I said, you never know what prop is actually going to make it on the screen. So I'm sitting there kind of like egg hunting, like, oh, there that one is, there that one is, and you're kind of just like looking for the next thing. And then I have to like do a rewatch, and I'm like, all right, now let me pay attention to the actual movie.
Yeah. You'll be a terrible watching partner because you couldn't ask you no question because you're busy looking for your thing.
So I wanted to actually rewind a little bit to the very beginning because you mentioned Prometheus as a bit of an inspiration for all of this.
Underrated sci-fi film in my book.
For its originality. Yeah, that's really Scott swinging. I like that one. But I'm kind of curious now that you're into the industry and have done this for a while, where do you find, I guess, what do you see out there in the landscape, like away from Marvel, that you find kind of either inspirational or that like maybe there's a certain, I don't know, style or certain individuals who, when they show up on a project, you tend to just consume the show or the movie and say like, those props look really cool. Like that aspect of production looks really cool. I'm curious if you're still finding kind of like your new version of Prometheus that then maybe sets up where you want to go next as you head over to, it sounds like, to DC.
Yeah. So like the Dune franchise, I love the aesthetics of that movie. Once I got into 3D modeling, I started paying attention to more closely to like more aesthetically of the movie, like in terms of props and costumes and helmets and things of that nature. But recently here, the one that's really like intrigued me is the Dune franchise and what they've done with the costumes and the weapons, and I've really been that has been like oh wow, like this is something new. I mean, like the Dune franchise has been established, but what they're doing in terms of costume design and the props that they're making falls along that line of like, this is something that we haven't really seen. And especially like there's a couple of helmets that I've seen in the movie. I'm like, that is super cool how they went. And I always get into like, what was the thought process? How did they go about manufacturing that piece? How long did it take them? How much time did they have to get through that piece? So those kind of things kind of start like jogging my mind. And ever since I started working in the industry, like when I look at pieces, those are always the questions that come up when I start looking at things that people have done.
Because I think that it's so funny because now that we're talking, I'm thinking back through my own like just personal consumption of film. I feel like your department is one of those where you, as a moviegoer or a viewer, you definitely notice it, just not always on a conscious level.
Right.
Like I think about like my fandom of Star Wars growing up, and obviously I think everyone points to the lightsaber probably as the most notable prop, but like I still remember, it's such a small thing. I still remember thinking it was so cool when Han is drawing his blaster under the table to shoot Greedo. There's a close up of the gun like coming out of the holster, and I just remember being like, that thing looks cool. Like as a kid, like it just. And whereas I think about like I've seen productions where if it's out of place, something jogs like visually or in your mind where like that looks like you weren't on this. I'll say that's like I remember watching like G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, and they start bringing out some of the wild props and weapons they use in that film, and I was like, something feels not right here. I'm like, I don't know. Like I love G.I. Joe, but like there's something, and I don't know. So that's what I mean. Is like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but you definitely can feel like when things are moving in the same direction and really well crafted. There's like I don't know, it all works, if that makes sense. And then when something's off, it kind of feels the opposite. And it's it's in your neck of the woods, but it's so critical to like, I think how we process, something that we see.
So what I've tried to bring light to, and what I often talk to people about sometimes when this comes up, is giving grace to some of those pieces that you may think that looks bad or out of place or things of that nature. Because I'm always thinking about how much time was allotted to that
Fair
piece. because that could have been a thing where like, hey, we need this tomorrow, or we need this evening, and they don't have enough time to. They literally did their best in that moment to put that part together, and then this was good enough to be on screen, but it wasn't what that artist intended it for it to be because of time purpose.
The visual arbiter is the director, right? There's this case of like, you could have tremendous execution, but it might be the orders from on high were for something that looked exactly like that, and then we as an audience kind of maybe didn't resonate with the overall vision of it. So that's not at all a knock on the construction or the person who is behind the scenes. It's more just a misalignment maybe of what, like Pablo and I have been talking about this Masters of the Universe movie ad nauseum, and like that's going to be a great example of Travis Knight's vision of what we want to see versus somehow what we've all been programmed to want to see from having grown up with the cartoon, right? And so the people like yourself who make those weapons and costumes happen are probably going to be 10 out of 10 no matter what. It's just kind of how how close Travis gets to what we have in our own imagination.
Right. Yeah. I want to sort of get to DC in a moment in terms of your workflow there. Was it the same? But because you worked a lot on Marvel projects, I wanted to see or ask which one of these projects was your favorite to work on. I'm really interested in hearing, because I like that, I saw Echo and I saw the stuff that she got to wear and the stuff that you designed. And you also worked on Werewolf by Night, although I didn't get a chance to really watch that. I don't know why, but were there any favorite Marvel projects that you worked on? And if there's one that you remember the most, not because it was your favorite, but because the ask was a bit different, could you talk about that experience working on a lot of these projects? Which was your favorite one? Which was your favorite prop? Which one was more difficult in the Marvel world that you were working in?
I would probably have to say Miss Marvel was one of my favorite ones because it was like, again, it was my introduction. And I really got the experience of working in two different departments. And I would say right underneath that is Guardians of the Galaxy. That was the first movie, not like the first full-time movie that I worked, because I worked on Spider-Man, and I did a few props for that. But the thing about Guardians of the Galaxy and why has a special place for me outside of Miss Marvel was because that was kind of one of the first, because a lot of the work that we were doing, we were getting a lot of concept art prior to that. And then Guardians of the Galaxy, it didn't start there, but it was kind of like the really shifting point from getting concept art to me coming up with the concepts and then taking that and that becoming the actual 3D part and piece. So that's where kind of things kind of like really pivoted for me. Again, because that was the first project that I took on after I had went full-time with it as well. And we spent, like I said, a whole summer just working that project. And to answer your question about the most difficult prop, I don't know if you remember in Guardians of the Galaxy, and I don't want to say it was difficult. It was a simple prop, like visually, but how, I don't even see adamant they were on the details on it. It took we were back and forth on this particular item, I want to say for at least 3 or 4 weeks. What we were calling it the hexahedron, that's what we were calling it. And I don't remember the exact name of it or what they were calling it in the movie, but it is a ball, like a pink ball that Star-Lord is holding that had, I think it was P1, had a number series on it, and it held Rocket's memories, I believe it was. And the whole point why they went to Orgo to get that.
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
That prop was 4 weeks of work. I did so many different iterations of that pink ball. Just the amount of veins, the amount of texture. It was just one sticking point that they just they were like, okay, we need one with more veins. We need one with less veins. I don't even know if it's on my portfolio, the amount of even down to the different types of metal they wanted surrounding it. It was just one that just kept getting hammered.
Wow.
And
I wanted to ask. So you referenced a number of the applications and programs that you use to kind of to help do your job. And I'm not familiar. I mean, obviously that's not my area of expertise, but I am curious with all the discussion around anything kind of AI and certainly AI in Hollywood and the role it does play or could play. Maybe more. You can take it in that vein, but you can also take it more generally. I'm curious as to what you see as like the new frontiers or maybe the next gen for what you do. Like how if I said like how does Darrell Maloney imagine he's going to be doing these jobs 10 years from now versus how you do them today? Where do you think kind of you'll see changes in technology or changes in process that might then ultimately lead to a different way or maybe an evolution of what we see on screen?
so what I'm seeing already, and I've already been asked to do, is that, and I don't necessarily agree with it. But we're at a point where it's AI is here, where people are replacing concept artists for AI, and even speaking with costume designer that I had developed a relationship with, and he does a lot of work in New York. Last conversation I had with him, he stated the same thing that because not only does he he does concept art, but he also fabricates as well. He does a lot of costume designs, and he said even in his work, what he's noting is clients are bringing him the concept art, and it's AI generated, and then they're asking him to bring that to life. I had a project here, I think it was beginning of December, where the individual bought concept art to me and said, "Hey, can you fabricate this?" But the caveat was that I still had to interpret it, so I still had creative
Freedom.
yeah to add to it because they didn't the AI didn't fully realize it, and the director wanted a certain look to it. So I was able to come in and do that aspect. I can see where it's a double-edged sword, but to answer your question, I I can see where AI can be useful in terms of certain things. Whether it's uh like making processes shorter. Like if I need to add something to a background just to kind of fully realize the concept art, I can see where AI can just produce a background. I can drop my 3D render on top of it. And that'll be helpful, save me some time. But the aspect that I don't agree with is it replacing people. Unfortunately, that's where I see it kind of heading, where um, it's going to replace people, and there's going to be whether it's for financial purposes or time's sake, um, and we're going to lose a lot of that collaborative process that a lot of us have today. Um, I, would I like to see it go that way? No. But like I said, AI is here and there's no way of getting around it. I think, unfortunately, it's gonna phase out a lot of jobs.
There are a lot of pieces here, and I'll put the link in the description to Daryl's website so that you guys can see a lot of the stuff that he's worked on. I wanted to ask, do you still currently work with Marvel? Were there any points that you were working for both Marvel and DC, or did it end with Marvel and you started with DC? And how was that process different in terms of the workflow or the how you got projects from DC? How did that all go? And which project did you work on with DC?
Marvel, I had stopped working with them because they a lot of their production now is produced overseas I believe in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. Um, they were they had a lot of their films based out in Atlanta, and they closed down, they shut down shop in Atlanta and kind of shipped everything overseas. So when that happened, like that literally happened, we got wind of it a little bit before the strike. Then the strike happened, and then that was kind of like it.
Mhm.
So I was like, one day I had a job, the next day I didn't. Like it literally was
Wow.
that. And I had to kind of like shift gears. And then DC came along because again, my same friend, the one that recommended me for Marvel, he got the call from the costume designer that he worked with prior projects to work on Peacemaker season 2. And they needed somebody to do the fabrication for the helmets and everything. So my friend recommended me, and then I spoke to the costume designer. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I'd love to have you on. So that's how kind of like that process happened. Um, and to be clear, that was the only project I'd done for DC. Whether or not something comes along in the future, I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of like, that project was kind of like the last film or industry project that I've done since then. So the industry is kind of in a dry spell here in the States in terms of, especially for like superhero stuff. Like Marvel was the biggest house down in Atlanta per se, and that, a lot of their production is produced overseas now. So yeah, the industry is kind of in a weird spot right now. A lot of people out of work.
Wanted to ask you, when you said goodbye to your day job to switch to Marvel, was it like, and I'm working for Marvel, and how, that it was it did it feel like that when you was like, what were you doing full time versus the Batman sort of situation at night? You doing something completely different.
So I was working for a government contracting company. So I was working
Okay.
actually on a Navy base as a graphic designer, and like literally had to have a secret clearance to get on base and get on. I worked in a Intel office, and I remember the last day. It was both. I was happy, but then I was also um, a little bit hesitant because I know that what happened could potentially happen in terms of like being out of work. But we had a good run of consistency, so it wasn't really at the forefront. But Russell always did tell me, he's like, hey, there's going to be a time period where we slow down and, we'll be off a project and there'll be some time in between projects. So I knew at that moment, like those times I wouldn't be bringing in income. So that was kind of like in the back of my mind as I was leaving. I'm like, am I making the right decision? But yeah, I was totally happy. And then when I got home, I'm like this is what I want to do. This is this brings me joy. Like I wasn't looking for, like it wasn't something that I was gunning for. It, like I said, Marvel fell on my lap, and I didn't know that this is what I really, really thoroughly enjoyed and wanted to do until I started doing it.
Yeah.
And it just brought so much fulfillment. And yeah, so yeah, I was happy, but at the same time a little bit hesitant when I walked out that last day.
I understand the feeling completely. One day we'll get into it.
Given this is a project you probably will get shocked with 50,000 volts if you talk about, but when he made the comment about one day I had a job, one day I didn't, I was going to be like, is that what Mahershala said too? One day I had a movie and one day I didn't.
Yeah, I'm not commenting.
all I'll say about that is I am, and the reason I'll bring this up because it did go public with regard to Sinners, because I think Ruth Carter talked about that there was a number of stuff that she had worked on and actually designed for costumes that Ryan Coogler basically ported over to use in Sinners because they weren't going to be used in a version of Blade they had thought they were going to make. And I will say that is like whatever you did for them for that project, I feel like there's going to be this treasure trove of Blade items and versions of Blade things that are out there that I think we wish we could have seen. And I don't know that we'll ever get to see them now, other than, like I said, unless people like Ruth Carter are bringing that around to other projects and we don't know it. But anyway, that was one that I think has been a fascinating one for a lot of fans as to the journey of it and the very different versions of it we've heard that they were working on. So I know you can't talk about it, but
I will say this:
I'd be fascinated to see the things you did make for it.
I will say I have folders full of stuff that I don't know will ever see the light of day. Um, I hope at some point maybe, but there was a lot of cool things we worked on, and I'll just leave it at that.
Damn.
Yeah, I believe it.
I'm trying to see how much I can get out of you.
That's as close as I'm getting.
Was it the same process in terms of, hey, we're working on this being Blade.
Mhm.
We're working on this. This is what we need. Was it the same process?
Yeah, the process was always, like I said, Russell had a particular way of working.
Okay.
So the process, our workflow, we kind of had down. Like that was the
Gotcha.
workflow. So
Gotcha.
that process in itself really didn't change project to project. So yeah, like the workflow pretty much stayed the same. Like with Russell, like I knew what I was gonna get. He knew what he was gonna get. We knew how we were gonna work with each other. I know what was expected of me. So that's how we kind of worked together.
For this particular project, did you refer to comics, or were you given a specific description of like, hey, this needs to look like a Japanese type situation? Nothing. Okay. Okay. um, damn. So, what are you doing now? In terms of the work that you were doing for Marvel and DC, and what are you doing now? Are you still making your own projects as well? Have you started to get back to that?
Yeah. So I started working on my own stuff. I'm actually looking into reawakening my YouTube channel. Trying to get that going again. I had walked away from it once I started doing Marvel stuff. Um, and just kind of waiting for the next project to kind of come along, whatever that is. Uh, but yeah, so like right now, I'm currently in the process of making a life size avatar. That's like one of going to be my kind of comeback videos into YouTube. Like I have this
When are you going to start on that?
I'm started. It's in the garage. Like it's 9 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's huge. So I already got like the foam. I got it filled with foam and got it put together. I just need to do like all the painting, like all the sanding, fabricating, painting, and all that stuff. Go through like yesterday, I was sitting down researching all like the different leather materials and the different mediums that they use for the clothes and things of that nature. I was talking to my wife about the hair and doing the hair for the avatar. So kind of been working on that. So it's and then little projects here and there. But like I said, I'm just waiting for the next project to kind of come along. But things have been super slow. But I as of right now, because I had to bring in money, I have a full-time job as well. So but yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right
But
now.
I think the bright side to that is that you're doing work still that you're an expert in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was able to. I was very fortunate to be able to transfer my skills that I've had over to my full-time job. I'm not necessarily doing what I was doing for Marvel, but certain elements that I've like just the 3D rendering process of rendering the images transferred over to my job, and I was able to bring those skills over. Even to the point where my job they had a pickleball tournament,
Mhm.
and they approached me about making a statue, a trophy for them, and I did the whole concept in this trophy, printing it, painting it, and everything, and then they made them a trophy. So that was something a little outside of my usual workflow I was able to do for them. That was fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, damn. We only have an hour, but we wish we had more. But hopefully we can uh link back up to
Absolutely.
see what you've been up to in terms of any newer projects that you obviously at that time you won't be able to talk about, but we can still talk about you getting projects and doing stuff. There was again, I'll leave his link to his portfolio down in the description below, so you guys can check out all the stuff that he's done. I had so many questions on some of this stuff, because I see for Gardens you did. I can see why it took you. Why that project lasted so long, because of all the stuff that they were asking for you to do.
And what's in my portfolio is not even like all of it. Like there's still a lot of stuff that I didn't even get a chance to put up there.
Yeah, man.
On screen. It was fun. It was every day was something new. It was literally a like one of kind of like the highlights of my career working with for Marvel. Like I really enjoyed that whole process.
Brian, anything before we wrap this one up?
No, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate the time, the insight, and the candor. It was awesome to get a little behind the curtain of the magic of some of these projects that we see.
Yes, definitely. And this is hopefully not the end in terms of getting people on the show so that we can talk about their experiences working on different projects and things that, you know, we never knew what it took for us to see what we saw in theaters. So as always, exciting to talk about and learn about. So thank you once again, Daryl. Again, I'm making plans to go out there and I don't know if anybody has seen Chef's Table, but the way they filmed that is beautiful. And so I want to do something similar with Daryl in terms of, again, discussing the work that he does. Because if you check out the Broken Nerd, you see the dedication, you see the details, the thought process, the experimentation in order to get what it is that you want. And so I just want to say that I'm inspired by a lot of the stuff that you do and the dedication that you have towards it. So thank you again for joining us on this show.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And yeah, that's it for us here on the Nerd Gen Report. Remember, if you haven't heard it anywhere else, you heard it here first on the Nerd Gen Report.